Hey, Anthony, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining PMM Perspectives. We're excited to chat today. Do you want to just share a little bit about who you are, where you are, and how you got into product marketing?
Yeah, for sure. I'll try to keep it short because it's kind of a long, winding story.
No,
My name's Anthony Pierri. I'm a co-founder at a product marketing consultancy called Fletch PMM. And
awesome.
we primarily work with early stage B2B SaaS companies, usually venture backed, really try to sharpen their positioning and their messaging. And then the main output we deliver is a rewritten homepage. So a lot of people will bring us in specifically if they're coming up to a homepage refresh. Maybe they're about to raise a round of funding or they just raised one and they're about to put a bunch of money that's going to send traffic to the homepage. And they realize when they're trying to rewrite it, man, this is really confusing. And it's usually not because of copywriting reasons. We just can't find the words. It's not design. It's usually like our product has become so much more complicated since we started and we're going after way more segments. How do we want to actually explain ourselves in a way that makes sense? And there's a lot of bad ways people do this that result in these really unclear, broad, confusing homepages. And most people, if they've been following us on LinkedIn, ideally, they've been convinced. Yeah, they've been convinced that that's bad when it's broad and unclear and vague and like very aspirational, outcome focused. It doesn't actually help people figure out what this thing is. So we basically help them. We work them through our process, which we've been developing basically from the ground up, very like first principles driven, trying to our way of approaching positioning for this segment. Because what we realized is there's a lot of stuff about positioning out there, but it's usually for larger companies. Like even some of the biggest names in the industry, like April Dunford, people like that, she'll like go on record basically saying positioning is a post product market fit activity. Like you really need to have a ton of customers to be able to figure out where do we want to pivot. And if you're early stage, it's just kind of going to be a hypothesis, And so we've realized, though, you still need to position even in the early stage. And there's just not a lot of resources for these types of companies. And so they feel kind of left out in the dark. And we were like, maybe that could be the segment that we serve, right? They're a little bit underserved in that way. So we've built this process and we run it with every company and we're always iterating on it. And so the business, we came out of a agency that did a lot of stuff, product management, product design, product development. And so they did these long custom projects and things like that. And we were like, we want to build the exact opposite business. We just want to focus on solving one problem over and over and over again, as many times as possible to make the framework as good as possible. So we'll work with a company in the morning and we'll run a workshop with them and we'll say, why didn't that work? Well, this broke or this edge case made it not so good. And then we'll ship the changes for a different company that we work with in the afternoon. So we've worked with now a little over 200 companies on their positioning on their homepage. So it's been a whirlwind ride over the last, couple years and has really gotten the framework and the process really, really robust to the point where now we can really throw any edge case. You could be multi-product, you could be multi-segment, you could be very large, you could be very small. And our model basically accounts for all those different variability and edge cases. But yeah, but to your other question, stumbled into product marketing as almost all product marketers do. Nobody wakes up, as a 10-year-old. One day when I get older, I want to be a B2B product marketer, for a SaaS company.
Maybe now. Kids are different these days. Yeah.
True.
As a kid, for sure.
Yeah. So I had a long career outside of tech, did a bunch of different things, and then really came into tech through this agency that we worked for, discovered product management, and then an even deeper subsegment, discovered product marketing. And then eventually me and my business partner, who was at the same agency as me, we started Fletch, spun off on our own, and you could say the rest is history.
So cool. I love that you're focusing on homepages. One, I just think they're so fun. And I think, to your point, we've actually at Olivine have seen, that early on, it is really difficult to understand that positioning and how you should actually message for companies because they don't have a huge customer base. Yeah. So I think it's very cool that you're focusing on that. Based on this kind of discovery that you've been through to nail it down to where you have, what are some of those key elements that you've seen are really important for a homepage?
Yeah, so it really depends on the stage of company. We've shared this a little bit in a couple posts. We try to share like all of our learnings, open source, anything that we're doing different. We try to get it into a nice diagram, share it on LinkedIn. We actually ran a workshop with a company on LinkedIn Live. So like
Oh, that's
completely
awesome.
taking the curtain down. This is exactly what's going to happen if we work together. Although we're iterating on the model so often that it will look different probably by the next time because we'll have tweaked it and stuff since then. But one of our biggest learnings recently is just how important the maturity of the market is in terms of awareness related to your solution. And so if you walk out a company like, let's say, Gong in the early days, for people who don't know, they were saying to sales teams, you should record all of your sales calls, which will allow you to do analysis, which will allow you to figure out what is the best way to improve like your sales delivery for your teams. So in the early days of a very immature market, people couldn't even use Gong unless they first bought into the idea that they should be recording all their calls. So the way that Gong positions at the beginning is not going to be like, we're the best conversational intelligence platform, because no one knows what that is. They're not even going to say we're the best way to record all your sales calls, because everyone's like, why would I record my sales calls? In the very early days, they had to position more around the outcome of improving how well your sales teams are delivering, and then evangelizing new activities. You should really think about recording all your calls in order to be able to, and at that point, like your competitive alternative set, it's likely like other activities that they would be doing to improve the sales team's performance. Like, don't invest in training, don't invest in coaching on call. What you should really invest in is recording and transcribing, or whatever it is, that early use case of Gong. And it's like, once the market then moves beyond that maturity level and everyone kind of gets behind the idea that we should all be recording our calls, and I think we're there, like post-pandemic especially, everyone is recording all their calls. Then it becomes, all right, well, when people know that they want to record their calls, Gong has to position themselves as the best product category for that, right? Because there's lots of ways to record calls. You can have people on the calls who are just writing down notes. You could transcribe them. You could do all sorts of things, right? If they're in person, it's going to be different. So they basically have to, if they can win the use case, if they can convince people that the activities need to be done, then they have to convince them that they're the best category for that. And so now they're competing against other product categories, right? Transcription, services, things like that. And then as the market gets even more hardened, the positioning has to change again. And this time it's, why are we the best conversation intelligence platform? Once everyone knows that they want a conversation intelligence platform, then they're going to really want to know, well, why is Gong the best one? And the funny thing is that Gong actually kind of won that market. And what happened when they started getting all these different competitors, rather than just saying we're the number one market leader, they actually did it again. They tried to make a new category and they call themselves like revenue intelligence or something. So it's,
I just saw that recently too. Interesting.
What we've realized in the biggest learning lately is when you're getting your homepage, if you think about what's happening on the hero as a representation of like the positioning shorthand, it should mirror the maturity of the audience that you're trying to reach, your target segment. And Gong actually did that. In the early days, if you go back to like 2014 or whatever it was when they started, it was very much like, make your teams perform at their best. Like it was exactly what the model predicted they should have been doing. And then as it kept going, they switched and they're like, we're a conversation intelligence platform. They start evangelizing the category. But again, if you start a new product, like Linear is a big example. Linear started as an issue tracking software from day one. And so they're actually all the way at the end, really, really red ocean, extremely competitive market issue tracking. Everyone uses Jira. So they actually started in, like, we give them stages, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. They started in that final stage where they just, even at launch, they had to answer the question, well, why are you better than Jira? They didn't have to evangelize. You should be doing issue tracking because everyone already was there and everyone even knew what the product category was.
Interesting. So do you feel like a big mistake that companies are making is they either overestimate the maturity of the market, or even maybe, I mean, because we talk about this example at Olivine, when you look at Uber's positioning and messaging from the start, it was super clear, it was straightforward, it was everyone's private driver. But now you look at a billboard, right, and it'll say moving people. Nobody knew what that meant back then. And a lot of times when we work with people, they have this aspirational, futuristic messaging that doesn't actually, one, nobody knows who you are, so it's not going to land. But two, it doesn't actually speak to the customer need today, to your point. What other mistakes are you seeing people commonly make? How does it show up? how are they approaching it? And then what do you have to do to come in and actually change the mindset there?
Yeah, the one you're talking about is extremely common, right? And it's usually what happens is as a company gets large, they hire a new CMO, and the CMO leave their mark on the company. And what they'll do is they'll hire a really, really expensive hoity-toity branding agency. And the brand agency will come in. And I've actually seen some like brand experts talk about this like openly. They're like, brand agencies are really selling executive alignment. They're trying to get all the executives on the same page. Good, strong strategy will make at least 50% of the executives mad. Like if you're a large company, any strategy is going to be prioritizing something at the expense of a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So like if you're doing true good strategy, like people are going to be mad. And so brand agencies come in and they have no interest in being like, let's make 9 out of the 10 stakeholders extremely mad that they brought us in.
Right.
And so what brand agencies work to do is they say, how can we find a message that 10 stakeholders can get excited about? And the CMO or whoever brought them in was like, I'm just trying to leave my mark on the company. I want to be the one that drove this big rebrand. It's almost one-to-one always tied with when the brand agency got brought in by the high-level executive as the company grew to whatever. And then what happens is all the clarity, all the strategy kind of gets thrown out the window for this very vanilla, like lowest common denominator message that these 10 executives are like, I guess I could get behind moving people. That sounds cool.
Right.
And then you lose all of the strategic differentiation, the positioning, it all gets thrown out. But that is very, very often a huge problem with these companies. There's another problem too that a lot of time happens when we talk about those like market maturity stages where it's like someone's like, I don't even know why I would need to do these activities. I don't even know why I would need to record. Like that's like stage 1 is what we would say. It's like you're trying to convince them to do the activities that would be required by your product. A lot of times what will happen is that the market maturity of the champion, like the person in the company who's going to be shopping, is way lower. It's like stage 2 or stage 3. They're extremely aware. They're like, we need an issue tracking software. Or we need a conversation intelligence software. And so we think you should have the homepage be written for the champion because they're going to be the person who really cares.
Makes sense, yeah.
But what happens is in the sales process, the champion starts the sales process and then they bring in these high-level decision makers who might have no concept of what these products are. They actually would be in the more immature market stage of like, even though their team deep down, like you can imagine the conversation, the champion comes in and they're like, I think we should get Gong. I don't think we should get Chorus. And the CFO is like, what are Gong and Chorus? They're like, oh, well, they're a conversation intelligence platform. And they're like, what is a conversation intelligence platform? And they're like, well, it's like the best way that we can record all of our sales calls. And then they're like, why would we do that? And then they're like, well, it's actually, so they have to walk them back up. And so what happens is companies, especially early stage companies, when they're talking to decision makers a lot, they get confused about the maturity of the market. And they think, I need to explain how my product drives revenue. I need to explain, because that's actually the level of fidelity that this high level decision maker would care about. Like the CFO, basically at the end of the day, they're like, they walk them through that train. They're like, listen, if we get this product, it's going to increase sales performance by 25%. And they're like, okay, I'm sold. Right. So then they're like, well, that won over the decision maker. Let's put that on the homepage. And they'll say, put that up in the H1. But the problem is the people actually shopping for these platforms, they already know that they want to increase revenue. They already know they want to record. They already know they want a conversation intelligence. And they're trying to figure out, why should I pick Gong over Chorus or any of the other alternatives? And so companies preemptively shoot themselves in the foot by writing the messaging for decision makers who are so far removed from the process. And they're like, they don't care about the product. They don't care about what it does. So we need to convince them. And I'm like, they're not the one who's going to land on your homepage, right? They've delegated this to people who actually do care about your differentiators and things like that.
That's amazing. That's really, really great insight. Is there any homepage messaging that you've worked on recently or through this process of developing Fletch that you're just like, it stands out for you and that you're like, oh my God, we did it?
Yeah. And I mean, we try to get to a good outcome for most of the companies we work with, right? So really the only time when it's a bad outcome is if people, a lot of times they'll get cold feet and they'll walk it back. Like we all land on the strategy and then they'll be like, actually, I don't want to do that. I just want to say we're, going to drive revenue and stuff. And it's like, okay, we're, at the end of the day, we're not an agency. We're more of a consultancy. So we give recommendations and you can do what you want. with the recommendations, or you can ditch them. That it's up to you. And sometimes we'll have founders who are like philosophically just not aligned. And so we're trying to get better at like making sure that people who come into the process understand what the process is going to be and are bought into the idea, right? Versus people who are like, I want to be the next Elon Musk. Like, we're probably not going to help them very much.
Yeah.
We worked with a company called Lemlist. That's a sales engagement platform. And we help them see actually that the people really, especially for their audience, they really are pretty mature. So they know that they want these platforms. And so they're trying to say, why would I buy Lemlist over Apollo, over any of those other ones? And so for them, we really tried to hone in on their differentiator. And the main differentiator of them is they have this whole part of the platform. They call it like email warm up. And it's basically a really sophisticated way to ensure that the cold emails your sales teams are sending get delivered. And so essentially they were like, we're the best in the category because even though these other products in our category can do all these amazing things, if the email never reaches the inbox, then it realistically doesn't even matter. So we ended up positioning them specifically on deliverability. And that seems like it was a pretty good outcome for them. And they've shared like that there's been, great stats and stuff across because of it. Are
you doing customer research for the people that you work with? Are you testing messaging with customers to see like what's landing? How are you able, because it sounds like you work with obviously the specific category, but there's tons of different products out there and at this size company. So how are you guys actually able to say like your customers actually in this mature phase?
Yeah. And so the agency we came out of, we did all the research. So we would do customer interviews, jobs to be done interviews with all different customers. We would do competitive landscape maps. We would map it all out and stuff like that. And all that it did was made us 10 times more expensive and 10 times longer of a process.
Yeah.
And so because we're working with early stage companies like pre-seed, seed, sometimes Series A, for the bulk, they don't have the time. They usually are like under a deadline when they say to us, hey, our runway is running out. We can't really spend 6 months on research to do this.
Totally.
They also are like, we don't have money to spend, double digits, sometimes triple digits to figure this stuff out. And they need to move fast. And they also know that likely these things are going to need to be iterated on a lot. Yeah. So a lot of the times it's just moving them from having no real framework of what positioning means, some super vague, broad message that nobody understands, to a message that can be understood. But we basically say, don't outsource your research to us. You just actually need to do the research yourself, and we'll help you sort through with what to do with it. And so we pivoted our model, and like I said, we did that other model in our last agency for years. And then this new one, we basically say, this process is going to go as well or as poorly as your customers. And so some customers have self-opted out because they've said, I actually haven't spent that much time with my customers. So because we give them a big list. We're like, these are going to be the types of questions we're asking. And if you really have no way of answering these, or you're just going to be shooting from the hip, like we can't really guarantee that this project is going to give you a good result. So we've seen some companies where they come in with great understanding of their customers. They've looked through the data. They reviewed all their own gong calls. Sometimes we've even seen them bring in a representative customer on the sessions with us. So they'll be like, hey, this is a recent customer. We're a great relationship. They're going to go through the process with us, and they're asking them as like the sounding board for a lot of these ideas. But yeah, so that's sort of how we approach it.
Cool. So obviously product marketing, positioning and messaging, we hit a lot of different areas of the business cross-functionally. So how do you ensure that everybody is aligned there, from sales to product to marketing? How are you working across the company?
It's usually in the team that we tell to join. So we say you should bring representatives from each of the most important business areas. Okay. And we say if people can't commit to being there, like you should maybe think about pausing this. Every person has to be present for the whole process for this to work. Yeah. And a lot of times if it's a really early stage company, right, it's like, it's us and the founders. And, they might be like, it's us 3 founders and we've got a dev team, and but really it's all us are driving everything. So those are a little bit easier. Sometimes when we work with much larger, because we'll work with big, enterprise companies, publicly traded companies, and those ones are funnier sometimes when you have to wrangle a lot of different executives than just the early ones where it's like, it's me and my 2 buds, and the 3 of us were tackling this thing.
Totally. And then we'll switch gears after this, but do you have anything in place where you're testing, iterating over time? How long are you typically working with these people?
Yeah, so we actually don't as part of our typical process, and it's short. It's like it's a 2-week turnaround. We
Oh,
basically
wow.
run,
Okay.
yeah, it's very short and very like time boxed and really low price point. So if you're
That's
a very
good.
early stage company, we charge $5K for the whole thing, and
Wow.
if it's a slightly larger company, we charge $7,500. And so it's
Okay.
either way though. It's like they come in, we run 2 workshops in the first week, and then we spend the second week on copy iterations, page layout, things like that,
Cool.
and gets them a wireframe. And so sometimes people will come back to us, maybe a quarter, 2 quarters later, and be like, we want to update it based on what we found when we launched it. And so sometimes we'll do that. We've also told people to use tools like Winter, which I know you guys are familiar with.
For
if
sure.
they want to. So some of them are big believers in the testing piece, and we'll do that proactively. But a lot of times when we're honest with ourselves and with the customers, like what we're really selling in many ways is getting everyone to think about positioning in the right way and to understand what good positioning looks like, and then giving them the tools to be able to evaluate as it keeps going forward, because they're early stage, so they're gonna have to pivot a lot.
Yeah.
It's very different than like, we've been a company for 10 years. We've had thousands of customers. We're going to do this giant quantitative study on segmenting our customers, figuring out, and this positioning has to work for the next, 2 to 3 years or something like that. That's not really the customers we're normally working with. It's normally companies that are like, you're going to have to pivot probably in a quarter. Like this is going to be like your positioning hypothesis for Q1. And we're going to see, can we land 4 more customers in this, it's a chosen segment or not? And if you can't, maybe we need to pivot, and some of your answers to hypothesis might be incorrect.
Cool. If you do another LinkedIn Live, I'd love to witness it, because it sounds
for sure.
I'd love to see what your workshops are like. It just sounds like fun, fast moving, and I'm sure when the light goes off for people, it's really satisfying, because to your point, a lot of people aren't thinking of positioning and messaging in this way. And so when they realize like, oh, this is how we shift, it's just probably a great experience for you guys to witness too.
Yeah, it's super fun. And there's a lot of those light bulb moments where they're like,
yeah.
At the end, we'll usually walk out like, all right, here's kind of the talk track of everything we landed on. We have a copywriter and product marketer on our team named Kate. Just a call ago, she walked it out and was like, all right, so basically this is what we're saying. And she just read it out. And they're like, do you want to join our sales team? Because it's like so exciting for them to, because they've taken it from all this complicated stuff that they can't work through and get it to this very, highly targeted talk track. And it really gets them excited for sure.
I love it. That sounds awesome. Okay, cool. So switching gears, you were a contributor to the PMM Cookbook. I know that things have shifted for you since then. I think I saw that when we were communicating over email. But I'd love to hear a little bit about your chapter. I think it was building a strong foundation and making a great first impression. And so what went into it? Where was your head at? Anything that you want to share there?
Yeah, so it's really mapping out as much as you possibly can in like your first, 30, 60, 90 days that you're there. And so I had built this framework early on, which was, I was really big into user story mapping at the time. And so building out a user story map of things that you needed to complete at the high level and then very specific activities underneath. And so it was basically like covering all the different pieces, walking through all the product and the different use cases and the different personas. Because really, like when we work with companies and we're doing stuff on their homepage, I sort of think about it like it's like if you imagine a clothing store, a product marketer who gets hired is effectively trying to say, where do I want all the clothes to be laid out in the inside of the store? Like, what should all the shelves be? What are all the different people coming shopping for the women's section, the men's section, the kids section? So they're basically have to map out every single thing, all the features, all the products, all the segments, everything like that. And then like something like a homepage is like, what are the 3 outfits we're going to put in the window? Right? Like we can't speak to every possible group. We kind of have to prioritize because there's only 3 of them in the window. There's only 3 spots that we can see. So is the company primarily more for women? Is it more for men? Is it more for kids? Is it whatever it might be, and things like that. So part of that beginning roadmap of like the first, couple months of a product marketer is going through all those exercises, is to basically map out every single feature in existence, every single persona that they might be targeting, all the different decision makers. And like we've created these canvases that basically help you do that since we first did the cookbook. And it's like a lot of the stuff was like more, when I was talking about it more on the canvas, it was like, you would just want to get these things down. And now we actually have like assets that would help you do that. But it's basically like the beginning of that is mapping out all those different pieces, understanding, what would people be doing without you and all these different features, what really are like the value propositions for each of them. And then trying to drive that cross department alignment, meeting with the different stakeholders, understanding where people's heads are at. A lot of the stuff that we now do in our first workshop with companies of mapping out, like, what do people think about this? What do we think actually are the challenges from a positioning perspective, from a messaging perspective? Because you'll be surprised how different it can be, right? Like we had a call with a company and the founder was basically saying, we have to educate our market on this amazing new thing that we can do. And then the sales guy was saying, actually, all the companies that we work with, they're very aware of our key differentiator. And actually, a lot of our competitors have the same one. So like their view on the market maturity was so different that the founder was like, we're this new cutting edge thing. And the sales guy on the ground floor was like, everyone could do this. This is actually maybe not the way that we want to position. So if you're putting yourself in that beginning product marketer stage, it would be like doing all that foundational work of just mapping, what do people think? What does our stuff do? Who are we selling to? All that type of stuff.
I'm curious, what was the founder's reaction to that?
That was a wild one because it was like like glass breaking or something. Like it was like totally shattering his view, and he was like,
the veil was lifted. Yeah,
the veil was lifted.
Yeah.
So he was like, we'll have to actually. They ended up pausing the process because sometimes we're like, if everything goes right, it'll be a 2-week process. But if some of these types of things, it's like sometimes they have to go on hold because they have to go back and iterate through some of these things on their own before they can make a decision.
For sure. So interesting. Working with founders is always really interesting in my experience. Yeah. Any tips that you'd give new product marketers starting a role? Just anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really is knowing the product, getting up to speed with the product as fast as humanly possible, like becoming the expert as much as the product managers and engineers or whoever, like as much as you can without needing to be too technical, that like you should become the resource that if anyone has any product questions, it inside and out. And it was pretty crazy. We were working at this very large company, publicly traded, and we worked with maybe 3 or 4 of their directors of product marketing. So they had like a whole product marketing org with tons of people. And we were on the call with one of the directors of the product marketing, and I was like, so like, what would be like the key use cases of this product? And they were like, she was like, increase efficiency, drive revenue. And I was like, no, like product use cases. Like, what are they doing in the product? What's on the screen? What are they clicking to do those things? And she was like, that's a great question. And I'm like, you're a product marketer. You should be able to rattle off like all the features and like, this is why they would use it and all that stuff. So
like you said, that's like a big organization, right? I feel people get so removed. Like product marketing just gets further and further removed from the actual product. It's so interesting.
So interesting. And it's like, I feel like, when you see things like the Airbnb CEO, Brian Chesky, he's like, I want all my product managers to be more like product marketers. Like to me, the product marketer is the one who's thinking about, why would we use this feature? What is it? What business outcomes is it going to drive if we launch it? And obviously really good product managers are doing that too. But if some of these companies become like you're just managing the backlog and the product marketer, having marketer in the name, like ensures that they should be thinking about like, how are we going to market this? How are we going to get it to the market to get people to actually use it?
Yeah. Okay. Last question. This has been so fun. Thank you so much. I love all the stories and the sharing. What else are you passionate about?
Outside of product marketing?
Yeah.
Fun question. This is going to be pretty embarrassing, but me and some of my friends we're all in our 30s and we're actually in a pop punk band.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
There's it was like a
mic. Okay. I love it. Amazing.
There's a TikTok or an Instagram reel or something where it's like this girl and it's like from perspective and it's like you telling someone you're in a band in the different decades of your life. And it's like, when you're in your teens, it's like, oh, that's so cool. You're in a band. And it's like in your 20s, you're like, oh, you're in a band. And then in your 30s, it's like, you're in a band. Like, so it's definitely not as cool as when I was 16, but we're on Spotify. We have 100,000 monthly listeners.
What's the name? Let me write this down.
It's called Good Hangs.
Good Hangs.
It's like Blink-182 or something, along those lines. And we recently had a song cross 1 million streams. So I see Good Hanks is kind of my place to mess around with B2C concepts where everything I do with Fletch is all B2B. So I'm like, does this apply in the B2C world, the positioning and the niching and stuff? Like we've used all that to try to grow the band. So it's kind of a fun experiment.
Who, like, if you were to say, who are you in the band? Like, what is your persona in the band?
So the band is really like, if you think about it, me and the other singer, to put it in startup terms, we're like the founders.
Okay.
And he's very much like on the, he does the songwriting, and I'll be kind of like the glue of helping make all the music that surrounds it. And then really kind of like the more driving force of keeping everything going in a lot of ways. But my good friend too, he's very similar. Like the two of us pretty much drive it forward. And so he's very like creative, very, very clever, good. He's the singer. And I'm much more on like the production side. So maybe it would be like CEO, CTO. Maybe you'd put me in the CTO bucket if you're going to use those terms.
Are you like, okay, like I'm thinking of NSYNC, right? And or even like Backstreet Boys. And like we know Justin for NSYNC was like the one, right?
I'm not the guy.
You're not the one. So who are you? Are you like who's coming to see you at a show? It's like I know everybody loves the lead singer, but I'm really into like the quiet one.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I mean, like, yeah, I would say I'm probably the one like pulling most of the strings. So it's like there's ever bands where it's like they have the very big front man who's like, this is who everyone comes for, but that guy over there, he's kind of the one holding it all together. Actually, one of the funniest examples is the heavy metal band Slipknot. They all have they're all wearing masks and stuff. From what I understand, like the guy who like he just has like, I don't even know, like 2 trash cans or something. He's just banging on the trash cans. Like the whole band is like, Slipknot would not be a band without that guy. Like he's driving everything and he's just in the back, like, so that's probably more my role.
Okay, so you're the guy with the trash cans. Got it. I love it.
It's a guitar. In our band, I'm playing guitar, no trash cans.
Amazing. I love it. Well, this was so fun. Thank you, Anthony. And yeah, definitely keep me posted about any sort of live workshops that you do. I love what you guys are doing at Fletch. It sounds super fun. And thanks for being on PMM Perspectives.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a blast.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you.